Oshkosh Common Council and the Rental Housing Advisory Board. This in regard to the recently adopted Act 317. Before we turn over to Alan Davis, I think we'd like to go around the room, everyone introduce themselves. I don't think we know everyone here, so I'm Oshkosh Mayor Steve Cummings.
Kathy Frederick, I'm on the administrative side and inspections.
Matt Mugrauer, council member.
Alan Davis, Community Development Director.
John Zarate, Chief Building Official.
Lori Palmieri, Deputy Mayor.
Steve Herman, City Council.
Linda Javoltis, I'm on the advisory board.
Matthew Steenerson, advisory board.
Tim Ernst, I'm on the advisory board.
Jake Krause, City Council.
Okay, we will conclude right at 5:45 because we do have a council meeting following this. So, Mr. Davis,
Yes.
it's all yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I've prepared some slides to talk about where staff thinks the program needs to comply with the new state law. And that's the first slide that I have. And if anybody has any questions while I talk about the slides and the maps, just please chime in and I can answer those for you or Mr. Zarate. If you recall, Act 317 was recently adopted this spring and signed into state code. I changed one of the old slides that we had from about a year ago where it says citywide. We don't have to do we can still continue with a citywide contact listing and registration. The city may implement a district-specific program of regularly scheduled inspections. That's one change in the state law that my interpretation of what they're allowing us to do. The other thing that they've changed that would have a significant impact on the program is the city may charge fees for inspections according to state statute. And state statute lays out what fees can be charged at what point in time during the inspection process.
Alan, before you go on,
Yep.
when you talk about implement a district-specific program, how many districts can we have?
I don't believe there's any limit. In theory, if you have a small enough town, you could probably make a district of the entire city. In Oshkosh, I think we have enough neighborhoods that need this type of program that we could pick those districts. There's lots of neighborhoods that wouldn't need this type of program. That's
And then,
why
okay, and the follow-up off of that is, who approves the districts? You implement them, does council approve it, or does it go through the advisory board? They make a recommendation?
Rental Housing Advisory Board would make a recommendation to council, and council would have to adopt it.
Okay.
It would be the same as the Plan Commission, other boards and commissions that have the final say.
Okay, I didn't see a big change to the rental contact listing. That we can still continue to implement citywide. We've already started that with last year's program. There's reasons to continue with that when it comes to contacting owners regarding all kinds of situations that come along, and so many of them are often owned by LLCs, and management is sometimes difficult to track down. So I'd suggest we continue with the citywide rental contact listing for the foreseeable future for this program.
I know it's hard to assume to know what we don't know, but do we have any inkling as to what percentage of compliance on registration has been?
I can tell you where we've done the most specific work, and maybe I'm jumping forward to a map, but we have a map over here. Maybe they can follow me. This map over here actually shows the rental inspection program that we started last year. The red and the green and the blue are all rental units. So just the university area, you can see there's some blocks that are completely colored. They're some kind of rental unit. Some of the blocks have one or two owner occupied. And then it kind of gets to be a mixture the farther away you get from the university. I don't have the same analysis done for every block in the city, but we could probably come up with something that at least aggregate that information if people would like to see that.
Can you confirm, or maybe City Manager Roloff can you confirm the police and fire, they have access to this information or readily available to them or easily to access for whatever needs that they would have?
I'd turn that over to Mr. Zarate.
Without getting
My understanding is, yes, they do have it available. It's actually a public record.
Good, okay.
So just to finish that, if they're not complying, is there a violation of law by not being on this list? Or is this a voluntary, send us your information kind of situation?
Well, if we adopt it as the local ordinance, that would be a violation if they
'Cause
don't.
I think that's what you're getting at, right, more or less?
I mean, sure. I think like essentially, and we'll probably talk about this at the end, but like compliance with the registration,
Right.
if nothing else, is going to be of critical importance to making the new program.
I didn't specifically research that type of question as to if you don't give us your contact information, what happens? We haven't gotten to that point with anybody yet because we've concentrated in the area that we thought was the highest need. When you start talking about some other parts of the city, I don't have a good sense of what compliance is like, and we never got to the point of needing to make sure somebody complied.
Well, if memory serves me too, a number of years ago, there was a fire in a rental unit, I think, in Ida or Franklin, and it took Andrew Prickett the better part of a day to track down the owners to say, your building just burned to the ground. So I think that's one of the biggest benefits is to let the owner know something has happened of that magnitude.
Next slide, the contact listing that we've created is web-based, available 24/7, and at this point in time, there's no fee, so that just continues as it was originally created last year. The biggest difference is in the inspection side of the program. I took an old slide and just crossed out the citywide and said a district program schedule for inspections is once every 5 years. You can see that city would contact the tenants to arrange for the inspections. Code violations must be corrected. Dwelling units where habitability violations are not corrected within 30 days will have additional re-inspections until the violations are corrected. The one thing state law actually changed that would introduce more units into the program is if there's a dwelling unit is created based on a complaint, the dwelling unit has to pass 2 consecutive annual inspections before they can be returned to a 5-year inspection cycle. So that was an interesting twist that the excuse me, the legislature added, is that if there's a complaint on a dwelling unit and they can't comply within the 30 days, then they actually become part of the rental inspection program. At least that's the way I'm understanding the way the state law reads. So in theory, you could pick out a district that'll have an inspection program, but if there's a complaint and the complaint isn't fixed within 30 days, that unit or that parcel now becomes part of the inspection program on an annual basis until they pass 2 inspections, and then they're back onto a 5-year cycle.
If they're not within the neighborhood improvement district or whatever we're going
Yep.
to call it, they wouldn't be on a 5-year cycle to begin with.
Correct.
Right.
I think once you go into it,
You don't come off.
Until you pass the annual inspection 2 years consecutive.
so if that one was not in the district to begin with, then,
But that's complaint-based.
yes, that's
Initiate,
complaint-based.
complaint initiated.
Yes, that's
That goes into
only
that.
complaint-based. So that's a subtlety that we didn't have in our code, but is a requirement of state law.
So how do you leave the district? I think
Uh,
is what he was getting at is.
If you're a complaint within the district, I think you're always going to be in the district. If you're outside the district, if you pass 2 inspections, then they wouldn't be part of the inspection program, and they never were part of the district.
Is the thought that the district, let's say, 2 5-year cycles forward, now has X percentage of, I guess, fewer inspection needs?
Mhm.
Is it the thought that we would retire the district?
That would be my goal. And then the last bullet point, landlords can arrange for vacant unit inspections, just like they could before. continue that as an alternative. And as it turns out, the state code says it's a cheaper alternative. I wanted to bring people up to date on the 2017 and 2018 inspection results. If you recall, we started this in the spring approximately of 2017, and we ended in the spring of 2018 when we saw the state law was going to be changing. We mailed 742 letters to the tenants located in that area, University of Jackson Street. That's the blue, green, and red parcels over there. As you can see with the numbers, 47 tenants requested the inspections, so we actually had a lower participation rate than I was hoping. 100% of the rental units with the interior inspections had code violations. A total of 305 were corrected, and now it's about 6.5 violations per unit. When it comes to the 260 rental units that we did an exterior inspection, most of them had at least one violation. There were some that did not have any health and safety violations at all. And as I indicated earlier, we stopped the inspections once the state changed the program. So there's 435 where we sent letters out, but we've done no inspections, internal or external. And you can see it's basically bounded by the University, New York, Jackson, down to about Lincoln.
So if there's, I answered my own question. Thanks.
Okay.
Good slide.
All right, instead of all residential rental dwelling units being inspected, now the city can select a neighborhood stabilization and enhancement district. That's just a name that I came up with. It's a district according to state code that needs to be identified and approved by the city council. The adopted map would have to identify the blocks to be included based on that state statute, and I can talk a little bit about what they require for something like that. And the Rental Housing Advisory Board could review and make a recommendation on that district or districts that we'd want to create. As I indicated earlier, complaint-based inspections would be added to the inspection program. So even if, say we have a district in one neighborhood and we get a complaint in a different neighborhood, if that property isn't corrected within 30 days, then they're added to the inspection program, even if they're not in the designated district. And we still have the state same exemptions for rentals. The Neighborhood Stabilization and Enhancement District. The city would have to create the district according to state code. We have some data that's available that we created when we were working on the Oshkosh neighborhood scorecard mapping. And that's the map that actually is behind you that we had at the state of the city. That identified a number of criteria that we could score on basically a block by block basis. We could take some of those criteria and apply that to a neighborhood stabilization and enhancement district. The criteria needed to relate to blight in the district, and based on the data that we have right now, I could see those bullet points for code enforcement cases, police calls for property and persons, assessor data regarding housing conditions, vacant houses, and location of foreclosed houses could all be criteria used in developing the blight determination for a district.
I think that's where one of my biggest concerns is going to come from, is the data source that we're going to use to determine our district. For example, and I do appreciate you guys getting me a copy of that. For example, all the city provided data is from 2015, so we've got at least 2 years, if not 3-year-old data for assessors, information, crime stats, things like that. The rest is based upon community block survey, basically census survey.
From census information.
From 2008 to 2012. And in regards to that, it was taken when the market was at the absolute lowest it's been in decades. We had a housing collapse as well as a market collapse in 2007. So any of the data from 2008 to 2010 is completely irrelevant compared to 2018 when it comes to values and vacant dwellings and The third one was the housing affordability stats. So I'm wondering, how are we going to get more accurate, more up-to-date data? Obviously, we're not going to have 2018 data, and potentially not even 2017 data.
Correct.
But how do we get more accurate, up-to-date data that really reflects the time that we're in right now?
The city-generated data is the data that was most readily available to be updated, and that's why we could select those for scorecards for neighborhoods. So I would say those, the top code enforcement, police calls, assessor data, those top four can be updated more recently than the 2015. With this particular map, it wasn't for creating a blight determination. This was to do a scorecard for the entire city. But you could see how that data could be used to develop a blight determination that the Rental Housing Advisory Board could review and the City Council would review and have to approve.
Absolutely, because I guess one of my concerns is, as you look at the quality of life analysis that was done, it's really quite interesting that, because blue, I believe, represents
Above average.
above average,
Yes.
and three of the largest parcels include a cemetery and the prison that have the best quality of life in the city of Oshkosh at the moment, comparison from that data,
Based on that data.
based on that data.
Mhm.
That's a scary amount of data to use if that's what our quality of life ranking shows. So that's where those thoughts come from.
And that's one of the problems with data, is that not all of it represents exactly what we're looking for.
Right.
So that's the Neighborhood Stabilization and Enhancement District, and it's not like I'm sold on that title. It's just called a district, and I wasn't exactly sure how to describe that best, but that's my first attempt there. The fees, that's where there were some significant changes in state law. As I indicated earlier, rental unit contact listing and registration, there is no fee. We didn't change anything with that. The interior and exterior inspections required once every 5 years, that would continue. However, the $145 that we identified for the first inspection has now been superseded by state law. It's $0 for first inspection and $0 for the second inspection if there were any violations that needed to be corrected. The only time that there'd be any kind of fees would be on after the 30 days and there's still violations. Then we're talking $90 plus the $150 that would be charged at the second inspection. And then each subsequent would be $150. Those would be for occupied units. State law also requires that the $75 be used for vacant unit inspections when there's violations that have not been corrected. So those numbers were taken from our interpretation of what state code was requiring us to do. I crossed out the reinspection fee. The reinspection fees are all dictated by the state code. So this is one of the old slides again. Why doesn't the city rental inspection program just target the university area or just the bad landlords? At one point, we had to do the entire city. Now we can actually select blocks and/or neighborhoods for the rental housing inspections once we designate those districts. So now I think we have a better answer for that particular question. For the program, we'd still continue sending letters out to the tenants for the interior inspections. However, we're not required by state law, from what we can tell, to do exterior-only inspections. So we could choose not to do an exterior-only inspection for properties. I gave you some kind of indication of what I think the fiscal, neighborhood, and habitability impact would be if we chose not to perform the exterior-only inspections. The highlight for the fiscal impact is it's the least expensive option. No staff would be added at this time. However, on the neighborhood and habitability impact, no exterior violations would be corrected and no interior violations are corrected with the project, with this, if we chose this particular inspection option. Inspection option number 2 that we've come up with is basically complying with the state law when it perform inspections approved by tenant and complaint-based only inspections. Most of staff time would be recovered through fees using the existing staff because complaint-based actually uses a separate fee schedule. And there would be cases where the neighborhood impact could be corrected and addresses the complainant's concerns. So there'd be some impact, at least to the neighborhood immediately surrounding the complainant location. And lastly, no interior violations are corrected. Option number 3 follows, this is the option that state law actually describes. Perform the inspections approved by the tenant, then also perform habitability inspections for exteriors within the district, and then the fees that would follow state code regarding the first and second inspections. And then if any violations are not corrected, they have specific dollar amounts for those exterior inspections as well. 75 plus 75 for the second inspection if they're not corrected, and then 75 for each subsequent re-inspection until the violations are corrected. The fiscal impact would be to actually do all these inspections. We would have to hire additional staff person to do that. However, based on our interpretation of what we can charge, minimal revenue would be recovered, because I would think most people are going to comply within the first 30 days. The neighborhood impact is the exterior violations are corrected, and then the property is exempt for 5 years for exterior inspections. However, we'd have no interior violations corrected.
But wouldn't we have interior violations corrected if this is an inspection performed and approved by the tenant?
Yes, all the inspections assume that the interior inspections are approved by the tenant.
Okay.
This was, I was trying to refer to if we didn't get approval from the tenant, no interior violations would be corrected, so.
But overall, minimal interior violations.
Correct.
would be corrected.
Yep. And then number 4, and there could be more, this is just what staff has come up with over the last few months. Option number 4 would, of course, perform the inspections approved by tenant. We could also expand our gateway inspection program of exterior inspections of all properties. If you recall, the council directed staff to do exterior inspections of the gateway corridors within the city, which is typically South Park, 9th, Oshkosh Avenue, Jackson, and I think there are Algoma, and maybe a few others might be on that list. When it comes to gateway inspections, we do inspect all residential and commercial, owner and rental occupied. We could expand that type of inspection program so it covers more areas than just the gateways within the city. Within that inspection right now, within the gateway, we also include the housing code, the property maintenance code, and nuisance codes, which basically includes the 3, Alan calls it the 3 unforgivable violations: the long grass, the junk and debris, and the parked vehicles on grass. That's what we've done in the past when it came to 3 areas that we would actually charge a service fee. Other issues had their own inspection fee schedule. The fees on this particular bullet point are already in our code enforcement service fee schedule. 0 for the first inspection. However, it goes 100, then 200, then 300 for the subsequent inspections until compliance is achieved.
Go ahead.
With this particular, the fiscal impact, if we use that one additional staff member, we have a track record that would indicate to me we'd generate more revenue from the program based on the inspection service fees, but not all costs would be completely recovered. Neighborhood impact, I think, would be exterior violations would be corrected and addresses neighborhoods' concerns, and more property and nuisance violations are corrected, especially the three violations I wanted to highlight. However, we'd still have no interior violations corrected with that particular alternative or option.
So then if we understand this correctly, with the new legislation, that we are allowed to include the owner occupied and commercial into this type of inspection program if we're doing it by district.
Well, from what I can tell, it's allowed by state statute. The city would have to make that decision as to whether they wanted to select the district where we do the inspections allowed by the tenant, and then we could put this additional program within that district or a broader district or a completely different area and do exterior inspections, as we've done at the gateways. So it's kind of taken the gateways program and
Hybrid.
it's a hybrid between the gateways and the rental inspections. But we do have a track record with the gateways. We've been doing those for probably 4 years now, and it's been pretty effective on all those corridors. So we wanted to throw that out as an option. And we only stopped at number 4 because there could be others out there. There's no particular order that I have on these, but that's what staff has been able to come up with when it comes to inspections beyond the interior inspections of the units. And the gateway inspections will continue. I mean, I would expect I'm going to have a gateway program continuing in the future, so it's not like the rental program would continue. I think they could be done independently of each other.
Alan, when we started this program several years ago, the state pretty much washed their hands of giving us any advice over interpreting the statutes.
Yes, that's
Are
the
they
case.
helping this time around? Interpreting kind of so that we don't end up making changes and now we're not compliant because we misinterpreted the statute?
I've gotten no advice from the state on any of this. This is based on staff's interpretation, working with the city attorney's office, and I want to say the League of Wisconsin Municipalities office. I mean, is there anybody else, Mr. Roloff, and you're not at the table, but has anybody else been available?
The
I think the
league.
municipalities article is probably the best document we could have to take a look at that.
Okay.
Yeah, the league has been very, very involved with this since the beginning, so they're pretty much hands-on.
Okay, let's see, so wanted to update a few more slides. What would this program cost a landlord? I added the still no cost for the contact listing and registration. The inspection is once every 5 years within the district, and I'm saying that would be the interior inspections because we haven't decided on exterior inspections yet. No dollars for if the unit has no violations. $0 if there were violations, but they were all corrected within 30 days. The only time the landlord would actually have to pay any money for the inspections is if it's after 30 days and the violations are still there. $240 if it's an occupied unit and $150 for a vacant unit. And the re-inspections are $150 and $75. That's what I think state code is telling us. If the landlord cannot afford to correct health and safety code violations, we still have 2 programs available. I'd like to get more landlords interested in using these programs. One of them comes with a lot of strings with community development block grant funds. However, the city still has their own healthy neighborhood funds, so I'm hoping maybe through this process we can figure out a way to get more money out to help correct some of these violations if that's where the landlords need to find funds. And the last slide here, I'm sorry, the last slide of the presentation is it's still the same process for appeals. Appeals from the inspector would go to Zoning Board of Appeals. They make the decision locally. If the landlord or the city are not satisfied with the Zoning Board of Appeals, you could appeal that ruling to Winnebago County Circuit Court, which I don't think they changed anything with the state statute.
That process already exists for the zoning board of appeals.
Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
To what extent, if any, is there tenant involvement in that type of appeals?
We've never gotten to that point with any issues over the last year. I don't recall. Nothing comes to mind when it came to a tenant issue at Zoning Board of Appeals. Can you think of anything, Mr.
No,
Zarai?
I would, my guess would be is that's only gonna be, the tenant would be involved when it goes to circuit court if they're asking for them to testify.
Does the appeals stop the 30-day time frame, or does it continue on and the appeal is done in the 30-day frame?
My off the top of the head answer is that they have to fill out a form to get on the zoning board of appeals. If they fill out that form and submit it with the proper fees and the proper information, that freezes the administrative work on it, and it goes to zoning board of appeals. So I don't know if that's gonna be before or after the 30 days, but it'll freeze it whatever stage they're at that point. So I think if they're past the 30 days, they'd still be in violation, but if they filed it before the 30 days, that would suspend the 30 days until it's worked out with zoning board of appeals or circuit court. And then I had a number of questions, next steps, that I thought I'd at least introduce to the council and the Rental Housing Advisory Board. Next steps for the process, we need to create a process for input, review, and recommendations. In the last year, we created the Rental Housing Advisory Board, and I think that it would be a body that would be useful in going through that process for input, review, and recommendations. Also, in bullet point number 2, the Winnebago Apartment Association would be invited to attend all the Rental Housing Advisory Board meetings or any other meetings that we'd want to create for input. Staff is at all the divisions and all the departments are more than happy to meet with Winnebago Apartment Association or any other neighborhood groups or tenant groups or anybody that would, the university, if they'd have any interest in knowing more about these programs. Let's see, we'll need to create clear goals and districts and procedures for the rental housing inspection program. There are some changes that we'll have to make through this program. Probably selecting the exterior inspection program is one of the most important decisions to make, because that will actually create the districts and the procedures and what you're going to do for the areas both within the district and outside the district if the council chooses to go that direction. And then last but not least, create a communications plan that includes landlords, tenants, neighbors, and the balance of the community.
Alan, do you anticipate any involvement with the neighborhood associations?
I expect there'd be involvement from the neighborhood
Especially, I guess I'm
associations,
thinking
yes.
is especially as we start to identify some of the districts, that if there is an association, that they need to be at the table.
Absolutely.
And this is really, if you recall, this is where it all began, with the neighborhood associations.
Right.
8 years ago, saying the values of their homes would be taken down by some poorly maintained property. The beginning of this whole program 8 years ago.
Apart from the obvious impacts to the inspection program, is there anything else about Act 317 that is like relevant, other things that that law does which would be of meaningful consideration to this board? Because there were a number of concerns from
There's a
housing
lot of
advocates.
tenant-landlord relationship, and I didn't focus on that piece because but I think Rental Housing Advisory Board, part of their mission is education, so that could easily be part of the Rental Housing Advisory Board's follow-up with public education about 317 and landlord-tenant responsibilities and rights. But it wasn't the inspection program, so I really didn't focus on that piece right now, but you bring up a good point. Education is one of the primary elements of the Rental Housing Advisory Board, and the inspection program is just one piece. Education on the balance of 317, there should be, in my mind, there should be more, and there were changes that people need to be educated on. But I didn't make a slide for any of those changes at this point. I'm
pretty-
having enough trouble following 317 as it
Yeah.
applies to the rental
It's pretty
inspection.
significant, and I believe that included the developer's bill as well, AB 770.
That was the
Did,
second one.
did
Yeah.
that go into
There's-
317?
No, that wasn't.
It didn't go in 317?
Same time frame.
Different act.
Yep, different act.
It was very convoluted to begin with. You were down there with me a few times.
So 317
Yes.
really focuses on these pieces, or there's other?
Oh, there's a lot more pieces in 317 than just the
Tenant
rental inspection program.
Okay.
But I didn't plan on going through the entire 317 Act because
Voluminous.
I don't know all the details of every paragraph in that act because they didn't really apply to the rental program.
That's top loaded with, or that, at least the hearing was top loaded with stuff about like the historical districts
The
and
materials and.
leaving
Oh.
that discussion to the end of the 6 or 7 hour hearing, so, as you know.
Painfully, I know. We know.
So your plan then is to take this back to the Rental Housing Advisory Board, get some of their input, and then, do you have any kind of anticipation when you think we'll, as council, will see something so that we can get this program up and running first of the year again?
That would be my target.
Spring?
Yes, first of the year, because I think there's budget implications, so we have to decide here in the budget process
Okay.
how that's going to work. Rental Housing Advisory Board meets monthly, so the first meeting in July, I think we can start the process for an input review and a communications plan, and there's a lot of items there that I think the Rental Housing Advisory Board was created to actually do, to advise the
Okay.
council on that. And then, at some point, it will get back to council, at least during the budget process, so that you can make a decision as to, here's the district or districts or the size, so we can give a budget estimate as to how that would impact revenues. And don't want to gloss this over, if, depending on the option you choose, we might need general fund revenues to help pay for it, because we won't be able to recover all the costs from the fees.
Okay.
And just to make everybody aware, I am also on the Rental Housing Advisory Board, and we are, we have already scheduled some public education about Rental Housing Advisory Board, so you'll probably be seeing some of us at the farmers market. And we're also now revising some of the materials that have been prepared for the public education. Obviously, as there have been significant revisions that impact those educational materials.
A couple other comments. As far as districts, I grant some of the data is old, but I think we all know where they're bad areas, and they've been bad for a long time. This didn't happen 2015. It's been happening since 1950. The other thing is, we were accused when this first came out, it was a money grab by the city. The money's grabbing money. Money's grabbing money. By state law, state statute, we cannot have anything as a profit center. We have to cover our costs, but we cannot have a profit center. So we're recouping our costs for this program.
And that's in general, where's the money gonna come
Right.
from to pay for the inspections? The previous program, was designed to make sure that the, properties involved would pay the, costs. In this particular case, I don't think we can recover all the costs from, the
Right.
properties inspected. So I think the council will be in a position to decide whether they wanna put other general revenues towards an inspection program
During
And-
the budgeting process.
for the budgeting process.
And just to be clear, taxpayers were on the hook for these things prior to rental inspection in full.
Yes?
What we had come up with was supposed to remove some of that burden from everybody in terms of residential taxpayers, to shift it to responsible parties. So now we're kind of coming back around as a result of these changes to some of that being shifted back onto residential taxpayers. But maybe not quite as much, we don't know yet.
Right, yeah, we don't know yet. The first year, I think, will be a test, because I don't think we have enough history or enough knowledge of the future to project how much it's going to collect in revenue versus how much it's going to cost us to do the work. And a lot of that has to do with which option you want to choose for the exterior-only inspections, and how big that area potentially could be.
That's one thing I think that maybe a second workshop in a few months is probably gonna be needed, or somehow to disseminate some information back and forth, because for the Rental Housing Advisory Board, which I serve on with Lori as well, if we go down the path and we come back with program X or program Y, and neither one of those is acceptable, we'll have wasted 3 months, and if we'd wanted a program in place by the first of the year, we need some guidance, and it happens with many boards and commissions. I think council needs to give some guidance as to what some expectations could be, or what they might like to see, at least 4 options on the table, so we can take those up, we can vet them, and provide that input and provide that information, and then council can make that decision.
Does council have any more questions, or members of the advisory board? We have 4 minutes.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
If a landlord does not pay their penalties, is it added to their taxes? Or how are we recouping the funds that have been billed out? Because that in itself is gonna be another person to maintain receivables.
Go on the taxes.
Right now, it
Correct.
goes onto the taxes. Yes.
Yes.
Is there a violation checklist that apartment, like, landlords?
Yes.
Where is that?
City website?
City website.
City website?
The inspections department.
I would
Yep.
say the checklist that we used for the previous program is gonna remain identical. So.
That would be my
that
guess.
list is out there, and
Okay.
actually we provide.
It was accessible before the program.
Really, it's health and safety. If you've got pink rooms, we don't care if the rooms are pink. It's all health, it's nothing cosmetic that is, unless it's, health and safety related.
Obviously.
They're all items to see.
I know, but I'm asking where is it, so we can actually go through, because I have
It's on our website.
67 different units around the city, and I've never seen that list.
It's been on our website for over a year.
Okay, thank you.
So once you do the inspection, and if they have 7 to 30 days to make the correction, how fast is the letter getting to the owner? You're meeting with the tenant or the resident, and the owner needs to know what those violations were, since it's gonna come to them to get it taken care of. I find it's hard to believe you're gonna turn around and get a letter out to an owner and have them have the work done in 7 days from the date of inspection.
What's been our history with that?
I'm not sure, the 7 days must be for like a smoke detector violation, but the current statute now also made a change that if we have the landlord's email address, we have to send it to that. There isn't anything goes through the first-class mail then. It's emailed out, and so we're anticipating that they get instant access to their email, and they're notified immediately.
Can I add a little something? And Act 317 has some portions in it about electronic notifications versus on paper. And so I think it's really crucially important to get those email addresses.
Which the registry will
Do.
facilitate.
So is it 30 days from
Inspection.
inspection? So, yeah, okay.
So if they mail it currently.
Yeah, snail mail
property
could be a week to
it's
10
about-
days
could be
before
a
they
week
get
later,
it.
4 or 5 typically.
Right, and if they live in California or
Could be long-
someplace
yeah, it
else.
Could be longer.
Yes.
sorry.
Now,
We found that to be a problem.
depending on the violation, if they have to have construction work done or something, as long as that work is approved or contracted, then that kind of covers that 30 days, even if it
Excellent
doesn't
question.
get done until after the 30 days is up.
Excellent question. Mr. Zarate has a good background in
Yeah.
compliance
Yeah,
with
so,
that.
and we do get, a lot of the landlords will say that, there's like no way we can get a builder lined up to replace our deck in 30 days. But we have a builder lined up, here's the paperwork from him, he's thinking that he's gonna be here in 60 days. Well, I would agree, that's as best they can do, that way we have the ability to extend that out. So
Okay.
that 30 days is
Flexible.
working with them and flexible.
Okay.
Most important is to get back to the inspector to let them know there is a time frame. The worst thing that they could do is ignore them. Something almost as bad as on day 29, they call us and say, I can't get this done. What are my choices? Because they've just used up the first 29 of the 30 days that we had as kind of a grace period. So we really encourage people to get a hold of us within that first week, just so we could line up what they need to do. And even if it means I need to line up some contractors, and that might take a couple of weeks just to do that.
Now, I know we're all out of time basically, but the 30 days is state statute, that's not something the city put out there. right? Or is
That's
that
what I
our?
remember. No.
That's our,
A state statute.
is 30 days.
And it matches what the city was using.
Okay.
So we were satisfied with that piece as well.
And is it part of the state statute that you can't charge on the second inspection, or is that just the city of Oshkosh decided that?
That's a state
State
statute.
statute.
So if there's a non-compliance, like say a bad deck in December, and it's like a warm December, and they can't get the work done until spring, I mean, that's 6 months. How are we gonna enforce that?
We'd have to look at that case
Are we
by
gonna
case,
be
you know, is the
lenient
deck
on that?
serving, is the deck serving an exit that has to be there? You know, we'd have to look at that. If it's
Or a
deck-
front porch? I mean, that would be a better example
Right.
possibly.
Yeah.
Still can't do the work in the middle of January.
Oh, they can do the work. It's done all over Oshkosh. They build brand new homes any month of the year in Oshkosh.
Maybe we also point out that, especially for members of the community that has questions, that the monthly rental housing advisory board meetings does have a section for community questions and comments, so you can bring your concerns to us, which is probably useful in as much as our capacity is to advise the city council.
When it is your board meet?
We meet on, the second Wednesday of the month?
3:30.
3:30. It's,
Room 310.
Yep. Okay.
I'd like to thank everyone for coming. Oh, there's one more question. Thank you for everyone for coming.